everyone, I'm Rachel Ray, and this is I'll Sleep When I'm Dead. This is a podcast about drive, what fuels people that love hard work, and what we can learn from one another. I'm excited for everyone to join me for conversations with people I know and people I want to know better. Welcome to I'll Sleep When I'm Dead. Hey, everybody. I am Rachel Ray, and working is what makes me happiest in life. And I like to do it around the clock. I mean, truly around the clock. You know, I was trained to be this way by my mother. I am always intrigued by people that I imagine might be a little bit like me and that have ideas and want to get working around the clock. And that's why I want to have these specific conversations. I bring all of this up because a person who has stolen many hours around the clock from me is one of my favorite authors, me among millions of people on the planet, Harlan Coben. He is hanging out with us today. Thank you so much for taking any time out of your day. What did we break you away from?
I just took the dogs on a long walk, so that was sort of nice, trying to clear the head to get started on the writing day. So not much. I'll just get to it when we're done. How are you, Rachel?
I am great. And where are the dogs now? Are they still with you? Because
they're in the other room with my wife, so we are not disturbed during this podcast. But my guess is they'll figure a way in to say hi at some point, as you know.
Laszlo and Winslow are amazing. And I love when you post things about I'm not working because Laszlo's sleeping on my belly and I don't want to disturb the dog. I mean, I so get that.
Yeah, no, they just rule the house, as you well know. I try stories out on them, see how they react and that kind of a thing. But they're a tough audience.
How often do you take them to the set? And, does everyone in your life know them?
Most people know them. I don't travel that much with them, but yeah, everyone. It's a good thing about their smaller size is I can stick them
You can put them right. You can put them on the plane.
Yeah, one of them especially loves the bag. If I take the bag out, he just jumps in. So it depends on which situation we're in, but they're happy
Winslow,
to be home dogs. Yeah, Winslow. They're happy to just be home dogs. They're weird. What can I tell you? Sometimes they want to go out. They don't want to go out. They're finicky like people.
Winslow can actually play by himself, which I find really charming. I would throw the ball. He'd go get the ball. Then I'd try and get the ball back. And he doesn't want to give you the ball. He wants to just throw the ball himself with his own mouth and run after the ball.
Yeah, but amazingly, every time I have a guest here, sometime during the day, and I have a funny picture of the actor Richard Kind was here recently, and he ends up on your lap. I mean, somehow, when you're not paying attention and he's small, he figures a way onto the lap, and you don't even know it. All of a sudden, you're stroking a dog that's on your lap. So he's sneaky that way. Laszlo's a little bit more of a stately lady who stays back a little bit. But anyway, dogs, what can we do?
Laszlo is just a mush. And what adoration there. What does that bring to your life as a writer, just as a person? I have this conversation often with people because I'm so into, of course, animal rescue and animal advocacy. But I just feel that it makes you a better human to have animals in your life. Can you speak a little bit to that?
I think to be a writer and also a reader.
Yes.
One of the most important reasons to be a writer or a reader is it gives you empathy. You have to have empathy. And if you think about the people in the world, we're not mentioning names, we're not talking politics or anything like that, but if you think of the people in the world who seem to lack empathy and seem to have a certain kind of cruelty, you rarely see them talking about books or reading. So there's something I believe, now this may be self-serving as a novelist, but there's something about story and something about books that gives you empathy as both a writer and a reader. I need when I write a book to empathize. Doesn't mean I sympathize, there's a difference. Empathize with every single character, even characters I may loathe. I teach my children, and my own rule when I'm creating a character is every single person you see in the street, the richest, the poorest, whatever, every single person you see in the street has hopes and dreams. What are those hopes and dreams? And that's an interesting, I said, that person you never dismiss. Just remember they have hopes and dreams. What are those hopes and dreams? If you can figure that out, you're going to empathize with them. You're going to be a better person for them. And I'm going to be a better storyteller and have more convincing characters.
I've told you many times, I bought my apartment because of its proximity to the Strand bookstore and to the Green Market. What made you, and I do believe great writers come from devoted readers. What made you love reading as a child? And at what point did you decide in life you wanted and needed, like literally needed for your soul to become a writer?
We were not a particularly religious family. We were a little bit of a disorganized family. I have two brothers, and I had very intelligent parents, and we were all very driven. One of my brothers right now is the president and CEO of NRG in Houston. The other one lives in England, was very successful in finance for a long time. They both went to Yale undergraduate, Harvard Law with perfect SAT scores. I was sort of the moron in the middle, relatively speaking. But in our house, books, and any book, there was nothing snooty about it. Books were sacrosanct. Books were, they were religious tomes for us. We didn't have the money to buy toys necessarily or whatever we want. We could always buy books. We always had books around. My parents on the side of their bed had stacks of books that were always tipping over. My dad loved guys like Ludlum and things like that when we were young. And our Sunday afternoon, when we would want sort of an inexpensive Sunday afternoon, we lived in New Jersey near the Lincoln Tunnel. Not too far from the Lincoln Tunnel. And we would come into New York, and on 18th Street, there was a book sales annex, and they would give you a paper bag, a brown paper bag, and they had like remainder copies, old copies, and you could fill the bag for $5. And we would spend the entire day there looking at books, reading books, and then my dad would pack that bag like it was the back of a trunk. You know how dads are, like it was a Tetris cube. He knew exactly
exactly. Like, how do you stack it to make more fit? Exactly.
So it was like a great, inexpensive, but just story was always around. And, as a kid, I remember one of my favorite Hanukkah presents was my brother had gotten the Doc Savage series of books. He was older. And I got the Peanuts, those books. Remember these? The comics and the books. And I would read them religiously. And then as a year or two older, then I had the Doc Savages. And so books were just always around. They weren't necessarily pushed on.
Oh, so they were, I think that's great. They were passed down to, yes, that's great.
And then, my dad, when I was 15 or so, gave me William Goldman's Marathon Man, which was a book that sort of changed my life. I remember reading that, thinking to myself subconsciously, not realizing I wanted to be a writer yet, but I thought to myself, you could put a gun to my head and I wouldn't put this book down. And how cool it must be, William Goldman. How cool.
That's how my mom and I came to the conversation when I was a little girl. I was reading books under the covers with a flashlight, and she came in to check on me for some reason. I don't know why. And she saw that I was reading, and she said, "You can read. Here, let's turn the light on, but you have to go to school on time in the morning." And it was the most beautiful thing in the world to me. I thought, I have the coolest mom, ever. And John and I both today, right now, on each side of our bed, on our nightstands, have stacks this deep of books that we're reading, and we flip back and forth through. Do you still go to bookstores? Can people find you roaming through stacks somewhere?
I actually went to one the other day, and the bookstore took a picture and posted it, which is really quite flattering. I still love to go to bookstores. They play a different role now, in a sense that's sort of sad. But I'm always telling people, support your local bookstores because they make your community so much better, right?
And there's so few left. Yes.
It's going to be another Banana Republic or Gap if you don't. Not to knock those stores, but it's going to be some chain store. And when you have a bookstore in your town, I think it actually increases your home value. It's a place of community. It's a selling point. It's just good. It's good for the soul. And if you have to spend an extra $1 or $2 on a book to do that, I'm not here to lecture.
Turning a page is fun.
Right.
It's fun.
Yeah. There's a certain value in being able to browse. I do miss that. I don't do it as much as I used to, especially since COVID, but just in general, I don't do it as much as I used to. I have so many books also at home now, being on certain mailing lists. I get a zillion advanced copies of books. I'm sure you do the same. By the way, for those who are listening, you are, Rachel, one of the biggest readers I know. What you're really freakish on, those who don't know you personally, is you retain everything. I've never seen anybody who has such a knowledge of something. If you know something, you know everything about it and you remember everything about it. It's like the weirdest, you're like a freaky memory.
No, I think this is the strength of reading an actual book versus skipping on a computery thing. And we've had this discussion before. When I actually turn a page and read something, my retention is much stronger than if I'm just paging this. Of course, I have an iPad and Kindle and all that stuff. My husband programs it for me. I don't even like to look at the thing. But when you're traveling for a long time or a long flight or something, it's of use. I get it. But I love the feel of a book. And if I actually read a book, I find that's how I'm really digesting things. Maybe it's just because of my age. What do you find? Do you have a Kindle? Do you use all of those devices too? Or do you really just love books?
Most authors will give the answer. I think most will give the answer. The same thing you're sort of saying is there is a tactical feel of something fun about, I have one of my own books right here. And there's that feel, the turning the pages, all the magic that there's nostalgia to. But that said, I'm actually, for the fun of it, I'm going to defend the ebook for a second. If somebody had told you a number of years ago, you could hold a lightweight device in your hand, lighter than this book, and any book in the world could appear on it in seconds. And you could change how big the font was, how small the font was. You could have, if you're at night, you could have light coming without disturbing whoever you're sleeping with. You could travel with 500 books in one little thing. You would have said, this is magic.
It's a miracle. It's like flight.
It's supernatural. So
it's like being on an actual plane.
I also can never decide when I travel, like what book I want to read. I'm that kind of a guy. So I will usually travel with some kind of ebook reader because of all those things, because sometimes the airplane has good lighting, sometimes bad lighting. I'm in a train or whatever. So, and sometimes with my eyes too, as I get older, I like a bigger font, a smaller font, Times Roman, Arial, whatever it is. So all those magic reasons are the reasons why I will defend the ebook. And I guess environmentally it's better, but I don't know. I can't speak to that, but I love both. And at the end of the day, it's what's on the page. And I think it's great if people listen to the audio. I'm not a snob that way. Do whatever way makes you happy.
The audio thing cracks me up because they asked me to do an audio of my book that I wrote when I was 50 that was kind of half memoir, half recipe book. And I couldn't get through it because they had edited it before I sat for the thing. Do you do audiobooks? I was so pissed that somebody messed with my words. I stormed out. It's so embarrassing to admit that, but I did. And they were just trying to make the thing more popular, but I just find it so hard. I don't like people messing with my stuff. How are you about editing?
I never heard of that. I mean, audio, when I do audio, they used to have something called the abridged copy, which I always thought was really terrible and stupid. We would have, say a book was 10 hours or 12 hours, we would make a 3-hour version. And part of the reason for that. Oh
yeah, I remember that was in a Columbo episode.
They were terrible in a sense, but the reason, at least there was a reason, because most people had physical, so you'd have 2 cassettes versus 6 cassettes. There was now it's just all done by, you're supposed to actually follow the text exactly. Interestingly enough, I don't listen much to audiobooks because I lose track of the story. My mind tends to wander. I'm thinking of story, all of a sudden I'm like, whoa, I have to go back 20 minutes or whatever. But I do it with a lot of celebrity memoirs. Right now, I was just listening to it, though it's 48 hours long, I think, because Barbra Streisand has a new audio. But what she did was she started to add to it while she's talking. She thought of new things, and you could tell in her tone of voice.
Oh, I love that. See, I love that. That I'm totally down with.
Yeah, she's just going off script as she's like reading it. She's coming up with new things to say. So I think someone maybe can correct me on this. I don't think I'm wrong. It's something like 48 hours long, the audio. So I've listened to it in pieces and skip around, and I fall asleep to. I like celebrity memoirs is my thing on audio, just because I can't.
I'm going to check that out.
Yeah,
I think that's a cool idea, man.
But audio is also the fastest growing segment, which is weird, in the book industry. So I don't know why exactly, but they are anyway.
Well, because people can do it while they're walking and jogging
But they could have done that 5 years ago, too, 10 years ago. And I don't know, with all the competition, everyone else that tells me to listen to podcasts like we're doing all the time. So I don't have people that much time to listen, which is great. So I think there are people, maybe it's less music. Maybe there's more walking going on. Maybe there's just more, I'm going to listen to something while I'm doing household
multitasking.
Chores.
Yeah, they're multitasking. I love that quiet time, though. And books center me and make me calm. And that's very hard to do. You know me. I mean, it's very hard to do. What are your sleep habits and what makes you calm at the end of the day? Like, you have a pile of books by your bed still? Yes.
Usually it is sort of that when I need to calm down or center myself, I'm the same way. I have to read a book. I think that, I have to use the word curse. It's a curse in society that we have social media and our phones and our internet. I really think it has been a tremendously damaging, polarizing, causing extremism, causing people to have anxiety. These young people today, and I don't want to get on a high horse, but they're supposed to every day post about climate and Trump versus Biden and the Middle East and things they know nothing about. And, when we were kids, you didn't, you were 17, you had a crush on somebody. You didn't necessarily have to see every day these images brought, and if you don't give that, and also wanting the likes, so you're needy, you're wanty, you see the best of other people's worlds, it's always in your face. If you broke up with somebody, you didn't see them again. Now you see them every day on the internet. So really, these things are curses. And we all know this, by the way. What I'm saying, every person that's listening is nodding along, because we all know this is true and we all still are addicted. But if I can put my phone away and read a book, there is very few greater joys. In fact, I'll argue that reading today is better and more important because it is
more
best escapism you can have now, and you need it more than ever.
I completely agree with you, and you know that. I think it's a very dangerous place that we've come to with digital and the way kids look at the world and receive the world. Everybody's talking about it now because of TikTok, of course, and that it's literally Congress just had the first huge bipartisan passage of anything in a very long time because they want to get rid of TikTok, because they don't want the communist China to be spying on them, and yada, yada. And there's so many people in an uproar. All of the young Americans are furious about this. Many of them are even going to Washington to stand up for TikTok and say, you can't take this away from 150 million Americans. I don't think that's what the argument is about. It's about who's listening all the time when you get all of your news and information through a digital program that's owned by a government. Like, I can kind of see both sides of the argument a little bit. I sympathize with people wanting to protect their First Amendment, but I also can see where this is a dangerous road we're trekking down for everybody. What do you think about that? What do you think about the TikTok world?
I'm not on TikTok, but I am on other social media. I mean, I do social media, frankly, as a promotional tool and let people know what books or TV series are coming out. And I throw in the dogs so I don't look like I'm just ordering TV shows and things like that and books. Look, it's a hard thing because we all know it's bad for us and it's a danger. It's almost like alcohol. But how do you stop it? Do you make people do you outlaw alcohol? So I'm always suspicious of outlawing anything. But this does seem to be a group by doing this, it does seem, and I'm not an expert, that they can now spy in a way that's really dangerous for the security of the United States. And there's no question that it is in all of their interests, Russia, China, whatever, and even people who aren't our enemies, to have us at each other's throats, and it's worked. We are now extreme right and extreme left, and the middle is gone. And there's my own personal theory. It's not my personal theory, but I mean, the theory I subscribe to on politics is the horseshoe theory, which is the far right and the far left bend around and become one and the same and extraordinarily dangerous. And I think we see that. And I think social media in general encourages that. You have to take a side. You got to take a team. If you say something moderate and normal, no one pays attention. No one gives you likes. No one hits that little pellet that turns you on. So you become more and more extremist. And then that becomes, in the language that's being used, is really detrimental. Will outlawing TikTok help that? No. Will TikTok becoming an American company prevent the spy stuff? Maybe. I don't know. I worry about American spies as well. But I don't know. This is a problem. We don't know what we're going to do. And it's not to depress your audience, but it's going to get worse because AI is coming along and all these things.
That's right.
I don't know what we're going to do. I wish that we could all sort of have the discipline. And I don't either. So I'm not getting on a high horse here to turn these damn things off. My phone is sitting next to me as we're talking right now, but I'm happiest when I forget it.
Exactly. Are either of the things you were just speaking about threads in something you're working on now? And can you tease what you're working on now?
Well, my next book is called Think Twice, which is my first Myron Bolitar novel in, I think, 8 years.
Yay.
And it's fun to return, and they're getting older. And I always try to make the book, and especially this one, Think Twice. If you've never read another Myron Bolitar book, this is the 12th, I guess, or 11th, I forget sometimes myself. But you can come in without knowing.
I think you're right with 12, by the way.
Thank you. You're probably better. I never remember how many books. I don't know if it's my 35th book or my 36th book or my 34th. I forget myself.
This will be your 36th, I think.
Thank you. So there you go. I just asked you. So, but I wanted to be, if you had never read one, this would be a great one to start with. And my pal, Steven Weber, that used to star in Wings, and now he's on Chicago Med and been in a bunch of shows. Does the audio as often as we can. We've been partners for almost a quarter century now doing them. And so, but my books always take place in the modern era. So all of these things do play into it. I've done social media. I've done these reality TV shows, which I think are also detrimental. But the thing is, you can't necessarily outlaw it. And also, I'm always trying to be careful that I'm not being a grumpy old man. Right. Our parents didn't like what we did and the grandparents didn't like
what we did. No, but it's what keeps it. But Harlan, it is what keeps these things page turners, is when you can relate to it, and you have to keep up with what's going on in the actual world to write as many as you do and as fast as you do. You have to keep that cognizant. So kudos on that. I mean, that's just smart.
Well, it's not even cutting edge. I just had a TV show on Netflix called Fool Me Once. And I wrote the book a number of years ago when nanny cams were first coming out. And I'm always trying to think, well, where can that go wrong? Well,
exactly.
Suppose your husband's dead and then you see him on the nanny cam playing with your daughter. Wow, that's a good start. That's a pretty good start. And that's how Fool Me Once started. So that's how I'm always trying to do it. The new technology is a sort of great way of doing that.
Do you keep a notepad or a notebook near you around the clock? Or I know that you can write in an Uber and coffee shops. We've talked about this, but do you always have something available to you? So when you get a thought, or even if you're half asleep, you can just crack it out on a piece of paper?
Well, sometimes not even sometimes I do use the phone for a computer. One of the things I just did one BBC Maestro masterclass. Lee Child has one, and Ken Follett has it, and Brian Cox did acting, and Helen Bonham Carter did acting. It's called BBC Maestro. It's a 4.5-hour class. But one of the things I mentioned in it is that I have my backpack with me at all times, pretty much. I have several pads, an iPad, laptop. I have everything in there, so I never have an excuse where I can't write. If I have 10 minutes, I can always, I have a certain compartment where the pen is, a certain compartment where the paper is, and I can always pull it out. So you never have an excuse where we're saying, geez, I want to, like I'm talking to you right now, geez, I want to write right now. Oh, okay, I got to get my stuff, and then I sit back down. Oh, first I'll paint the living room, and then any excuse to not write. I try to get rid of all the excuses not to write. So if you're out there and you're listening and you want to be a writer, always have your writing stuff with you no matter what. Have a portable version. You don't have to be in that special little secret spot to write. You can write any place. Always have that with you so you are ready to go.
You are my hero, my champion. When I was a little girl, every picture I drew, the fish, the little person, the giraffe, anything would have a bag. And my mother said, why do they all have purses? I said, Mom, that's not their purse. That's where they keep their notebook and their pencil. It brings me such great joy to know that you have that backpack all the time, stuffed and ready to go.
Well, look, I'll write. Anyway, if you're writing, it's whatever's going to get you to write, right? I don't care if you write on stone tablets. You just whatever's going to make you write. But I find I do both. I sometimes do it on a laptop straight, but most of the time I write by hand for a little bit. And I draw pictures, and I can cross out, and I can make arrows.
And then when you get to the boring part, when you get to the typing part, it's so much easier because you've got a map.
Your first draft is already your second draft. And there's something childlike and freeing about having a pen or a pencil to paper. It's just the same thing we were just talking about with books. I think part of the reason why so many people like yourself don't like ebooks or whatever, I'm not saying you don't, but people who don't, it's because there's something nostalgic and reminding you of your childhood of turning the pages. If you step back a little bit, it's certainly not more. It's not more efficient to have a book. You have to look, turn pages, you have to do something physical, you have to worry about the lighting. But there's something nostalgic about that and bring you back to another time.
And it's tactile. I'm touching the book. I'm being a part of it. When I turn that page and I'm wondering what's on the next page. And it's exciting and fun to me. It's adventurous when I can feel a page turn on a newspaper too. I'm one of the 4 people on the planet that still likes to hold and read a newspaper. I just love that feeling of I did this and now I'm going to learn this. That's something all new. Look, there's a new page. Oh, I don't know what's going to happen. I feel almost like a cartoon character. that moment happens, it's just exciting. It's more exhilarating. I don't know what you did before you became you. What are some weird things you did for jobs over the years?
Well, I worked in the laundry room when I was in college for a number of years. I had some pretty strange jobs. I don't necessarily think, though, in my own case, I was formed by that. I had parents who were extraordinarily, especially my mother. Well, both my parents were extraordinarily intelligent. Both, I think, were frustrated by their positions in life, which not necessarily reflect, I think, their abilities, so to speak. But my mother was very, very early on the pushing the kid into the right college age. I mean, I'm 62, and if you see a sweatshirt of me at the age of 3, I have a Harvard sweatshirt on, even back then. My mom was very early on that train with all 3 of us, and we were expected to do really well. We weren't disciplined to do really well. It wasn't like we couldn't leave our room until our homework was done. And I don't necessarily see myself as particularly, even though I have 36 books and whatever many shows, I don't look at myself as somebody who's particularly hardworking. But when I found something that I really loved, it was different. So I say there's 3 things that make a writer. 2 are obvious and 1 isn't so obvious. The 2 that are obvious is, 1 is you have to inspiration. You need 3 things. Inspiration, well, duh, you have to have, wanting to be inspired to write. 2, perspiration. That is, you have to actually sit down and write. You can't, outlining is not writing, going to the coffee shop is not writing, reading is not writing, creating characters is not writing, only writing is writing, only creating words on paper or a screen. But the 3rd, and probably the most important in my case, was desperation. That is, I'm not meant to do anything else. I'm not really particularly good at anything. I do the really bad work habits. I'm sloppy. I'm disorganized. I'm forgetful. I mean, you know some of this about me. My focus wanders. And so, but the fact that if I didn't do this, I'd have to get a real job or have to do something else terrifies me so much that it makes me run back to my computer or notebook and write that much harder.
I agree. I feel like I'm a caged animal if I have to sit at a desk or do something that's set or preordained, or you have to blah, 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 yada, yada. I work harder as a free spirit. I really do. Is Anne like that? You're a brilliant, amazing wife. I'm a huge fan of Anne, and she is amazing, and she seems to have a very, very serious job. Let's talk about Anne.
She's a trained pediatrician out here at New York Presbyterian, but the last 5 years she's been the dean of admissions for Columbia University's medical school. She's pulling back from that, I think, to go back. Her love was always to take care of underserved communities in pediatrics. But Anne was sort of the opposite. Anne was that type A who was going to, both on the basketball court, both of us played college basketball, and in the classroom was just going to work harder than you. She spent a lot of time in the library, and she would just be able to focus and outwork you in that way. She was that girl. I always tease her, like, she was the girl who would come in for that test and say, I'm going to fail, and finish first and be putting reinforcements in her notebook the rest of the class in a non-obnoxious way. So Anne is very studious. I always in school was just trying to figure a way of getting by. I took a lot of classes when I was in college that involved writing papers because I knew I had a skill for writing that I could always get away with it without having to do all of the reading or all of the work. So I always tell my kids, don't pay attention to dad. Pay attention to mom.
Well, no, your kids are very diverse in their talents. But Anne, I have to tell you, we all spent some time together during the pandemic. And we would do these goofy cook-alongs and drink-alongs. Harlan would make the drinks with John, and I would cook with Anne. And Anne was the most studious of students. We did this with a couple of different groups of friends, and she was amazing. And her food sometimes looked better than mine. And I'm like, really, Anne? Showing off. But what I remember most, I've even had dreams about it, where I just remember her saying how hard it was for her when acting as dean, that she couldn't hug kids and really touch them and talk to them when they were coming in or not being accepted, in either direction. And I just always think of that when I think of Anne. I just think of her compassion, her empathy for other people. It just is, it's making me tear up a little bit. It's just the first thing I think of when I think of her.
Thank you.
How delightful and wonderful she is. And I'm going to tell a tale here. John and I recently went to your apartment, you guys' apartment, and it was a beautiful evening, and the dogs were being kooky, and Winslow was throwing the ball at himself, didn't want me to touch it anymore. Just doing his thing. Laszlo just being total mush. So fun. You're making cocktails. She's making food. And there was the mystery of the potatoes. Cooked everything. She cooked salmon. She cooked steak. She cooked all of the kids' favorites. Kids being grown-up people, by the way. But all of the family's favorites. And no one could find the potatoes. It was the mystery of the potatoes. The Jacques Pepin potatoes. It was so much fun. You guys are so warm and open. How many people get to go to that apartment? Because it was really fun.
Oh, thanks. We're not, we're homebodies. I'm a writer, so I guess somebody described me as a socially adept introvert. I think you are a little bit too, quite frankly. And I'm tired after those sort of things, but,
Yes, exactly.
but we don't do it very often. I always say to Anne, we got to socialize more, but we don't. And we're pretty happy not. So it's an interesting mix. You and John have become, people don't necessarily want to hear all this and this thing with John, you and John become dear, dear friends, and we love you guys. And we always have both a good time, and it's never superficial. That's the other thing I'm not a big fan of. I'm not a big fan of small talk. I'm not a big fan of superficial. And I think the very first night we met, we already were hooking up with talking about not just, how's the weather. I'm not good at that. I have a tendency to look like I'm tuning out. And also my friends know that I'm a little weird in that way that I do go away. My kids call it like Dadland or La La Land, where all of a sudden I'll be like, oh, wait a minute, it would work in my book? And I'll just be looking off and I won't be paying attention to what someone's saying. I don't mean to be rude, but sometimes I am. And the people who know me just kind of get that, and it's okay. I'm not crazy, but I try. I'm always, even if I'm not writing, I'm always thinking about writing. I'm always thinking about it.
I've told you this 100 times. I mean, I am so scared in social, you got to go to a Christmas party or here's an event or here's something. I'm just petrified because I'm not good at it. And I know I'm not. And I like to try things that I think I might be successful at. And I know I'm not successful at that. So I just get nervous. That's all. I just get nervous.
It's a funny thing is people would think the opposite of us. And actually, to be honest with you, every time I do step out of that, it works. So the first time we met, we were at a party together.
That's right.
And we did not know each other, but we had a mutual friend who was always saying to me, oh, you have to say hi to Rachel Ray. If you see her, she would get along. She'd read your books. Just say hi to her. And I'm at the party with Anne, and we're standing in a corner. You guys are standing in a corner, and neither one of us is making a move anyway. And I actually said to Anne, I go, let's do it. Let's just go over. I've always wanted to meet Rachel Ray and just say hi and see what happens, which is so out of character for me. And look, it did work. Maybe we wouldn't be friends today.
I was petrified and standing against the wall, which I explained to you after you bent way over so that we could all become friends.
So every time I
was
do
petrified.
Well, we're saying that we are socially the introverts. Every time I do make the move, and every time I do say, I don't want to go out tonight, but we end up doing it, usually it's the right move. So on the one hand, I think one of the secrets to life is be able to just enjoy the quieter moments. I mean, if you go to something, everyone's always like, live your life to the fullest. I get that, but your life is, there's days you're not traveling, you're not visiting Rome today or whatever else. But if you enjoy the quiet moments, I think you're going to be better off and happier as a person. So I do find tremendous joy in the solitude, the quiet moments, the not doing anything. And then should probably more often push myself to do things because it ends up usually working out.
It does more often than we think, right?
Yeah.
All right. So let's give some love to the kids. They're all very different. They all have different talents. Some are more like Anne, and Charlotte is very much like you, and she has some big moments coming up soon. Let's give Charlotte some love here on the moments she's going through right now as writer and producer. She's got some really big stuff going on. But all your kids, talk about that. Your family is so much a part of what drives both of you and Anne. It's a really lovely family to just even watch as an outsider. So give some love to the kids.
Well, first of all, there's nothing more boring for people than to hear someone talk about their kids. So I will be extraordinarily brief. My oldest, Charlotte, has written with me and actually adapted some of the stuff that I've done on Netflix and Amazon. People maybe know Fool Me Once, Shelter, Stay Close, The Stranger. She's worked on a lot of them. And then after training her and working hard so I could take it easy, she left me and now has her own series. Thanks very much.
Isn't that great, though? It's so exciting.
It's so great. And so the name of the show, which will be out March 28th in the USA on Tubi, which is a free network, by the way, the largest free streamer in the world, or at least in America. And if you want to get on Tubi and don't know how, you just Google Dead Hot, and Tubi, and you're on. It's nothing, you don't have to fill anything out, you don't have to sign up, you don't have to download. on your TV, you can easily download Tubi, but you can watch it in 4 seconds. And I actually have a lot of really good movies on there. My old French movie, Tell No One, I just found out was on Tubi. Anyway, it was on Prime Video, the Amazon Prime Video in the UK. It's going to be on here in the US. It's called Dead Hot. It's 6 episodes. It is wild and nutty and quirky and eccentric crime drama. Very funny, skewered toward young people, but I think that skews toward young people, but I think that people will really, really enjoy it. And and I'm super proud. And she wrote all 6 episodes. She created it, wrote all 6 episodes.
Amazing. I can't wait.
I had nothing to do with it. And
yes, you did. You're her dad. There's a little DNA going on there.
29 years ago. And then very quickly, Ben may be coming into this business to help out on more of a business end. He's got a great business mind. Will works at NASA and Johnson Space Center. He is actually a rocket scientist. He works
literally a rocket scientist.
And then Eve does genetic counseling and trying to find a cure with research for ALS here in New York.
Isn't that brilliant? Honestly.
Yeah, I don't really. They explained to me, I'm like, whoa, slow down. It's Dad. Dad doesn't understand anything.
I don't understand it. That's Anne was trying to explain what she does to me. And I'm like, I don't understand anything she just
I don't get it either. And when he says, I'm like, I'll pretend I'm interested because you're my daughter and I love you, but I'm not getting it, right? Dad's not that smart, but Dad's behind you 100%. If you can tell like a story, maybe he'll understand it, but I don't really understand it. But as long as there's no greater joy than having the kids hopefully in good place. So I'm very excited for Charlotte's new show, and I got to figure a way of getting her to come back to work for me because I need her. So when I got the call, somebody called me and told me that her show had been greenlit, which if anybody knows, is just impossible on TV to get a show greenlit, impossible. I ran upstairs to tell Anne, and I ran in the room, and Anne goes, oh my God, what's wrong? I'm like, what do you mean what's wrong? She goes, well, you're crying. And I was crying in joy. We all, a lot of us, we get that. Anyway, boring, sorry. I did
It's not boring at all. It's beautiful.
I think as a couple, Anne and I, more than any couple that I know, ended up being is 50-50. There's a lot of fathers who say they're 50% of the time, or a lot of mothers. And really we were, just because Anne having the job of a pediatrician actually had to go to work, and I having a job as a writer would be home more. So we did actually pretty much and pretty well divided up actually. I
love that. That's
50,
great.
As much as you can be 50-50. I think that we kind of were in all those sort of duties.
I think that John and I are we don't have any children. We have one dog at a time, and that's about as much as we can handle. But I love my life with John because we are 50-50 in that he loves being on his own and I love being on my own. Like I can write all day and cook all day and homemake all day. I love homemaking. I mean, I don't have kids, but I love homemaking. I always found it so insulting when people say, but you don't have children. I'm like, so what? I make a nice home. I make a nice home. And John he's a lawyer, but he prefers to be a musician. He can spend all day in the studio I'm sitting in right now. And he's so filled with joy at the end of the day when he's had a good day, with his instruments and recording something. We're separate, but that brings us together because we each have a little bit of space. Do you agree with that? That folks, anyone in relationship of any kind, sometimes it brings you closer together to have a little bit of space and your own time.
I agree with that. Anne does not, though. Anne does not like space. Anne likes, maybe because she's one of 7 kids, she does not, she's the opposite. Even if we're just sitting in the same room, she hates to be alone. It's really interesting because as she's and we've described her to people, very strong, independent, working woman and all this stuff. But it's a funny thing with her. And she pretends like it's because I'm wonderful, but it's not. It's because she hates to be alone. She just doesn't like being alone. And so each of us have our own thing. I mean, I think part of it is that you accept that with the person that you're with, and it sort of complements what you do and what you can tolerate and what you both want. So yes, she knows as a writer, I got to be alone. But I get that because she has to go to work. And so I have it there. But when she's around, she does like me to be in the same room. And I get that. And so it's part of what makes all relationships, or life is about balance. Don't you think? It's sort of, I could be, it's your relationship with your spouse, your friends, your health, your eating, your exercising, and your work. And for example, if all those other things are working well, but I'm writing poorly, my life is out of balance and the rest of those are going to go.
And it's going to go down the shitter.
You really
exactly.
Try to balance. I think the secret is to try, and who am I to say this, but it's to try to keep a balance. I find that if I do one of those things, if I'm eating really poorly, if I'm not getting along with somebody or whatever else, all the other stuff gets out of balance. It's one of the reasons that I have to write. Writing is one of those things. If I'm not writing well or I'm not thinking about writing, my life will start to teeter in other areas. They spread out.
John and I are like that too. We both, if he writes a crap song or he doesn't like what he's doing that day with music, or if he has a business meeting, is his lawyer guy side, he gets really mad. And if I'm trying a new recipe or something, or I spend all this time writing something and I go back and read it over and I hate it, I feel like I've wasted all of these hours and I get really angry. John and I are both that way. We just get grumpy. And that's when I'm very dramatic and how come you're not here? Why don't you ever just come downstairs and can't we just watch a movie or something? And that's exactly what it is. And you just really made that point for me very clear. Thank you, my friend. Yeah. It's just because I'm pissed at me or something that happened in my day. And so I'm going to let that expand and expound on that. And I don't know if that's being Italian or just being me, but it's the truth. Listen, you're such an open person and you share a lot. Is there something that would surprise people about you that you have not shared before?
Yes, I guess. This is funny. I mean, it's a weird factoid instead of being something that I do, a weird factoid that I once saw Vice President Hubert Humphrey naked. That's all the that.
That is a shocker.
There you go. I thought
that's a news grabber. And why?
Okay, so I was I think 10, 11 years old in a locker room playing tennis with friends, and Hubert Humphrey was there. And it's funny, especially when I was kids, old men have no shame when it comes to nudity in a locker room. They just walk around in a locker room nude. And Vice President Hubert Humphrey in Florham Park, New Jersey, at a club where I was playing tennis.
How excellent.
So there you go. I wanted to give you a real scoop that probably no one else would have there. So that's the one factoid.
Were they hanging low or staying up there?
I was terrified. I mean, ask any guy my age about locker rooms they were kids. I'm not exactly sure why old people have absolute. I get it. I'm actually very proud they have no shame of their nudity, but maybe a little wouldn't hurt. You know what I'm saying?
A little bit of
a towel wrapped around wouldn't hurt. So.
Well, I don't know how to top that. So I will just thank Harlan Coben for being with us today. And one of the greatest things about I'll Sleep When I'm Dead is that I have moments like this in my life. I am so grateful to you, my friend. And I have an offer. You and Ann have never been upstate. I feel you guys haven't been here yet, correct?
No, we did to Tuscany though, but we have
you've been to Tuscany, but you haven't been upstate. So there's that.
If you look behind me, Rachel, you can see where my thumb is.
Yeah,
that's a painting of your.
Oh yes,
Tuscany, right there. Actually, that was when we were in Tuscany. Isn't that amazing?
It is amazing.
Sorry, folks, but that painting where my thumb is actually outside Rachel's place in Tuscany.
Painted by Sonia, our mutual friend.
Yep.
She also has painted Harlan sitting and typing at the window, although he writes everywhere. But she's also done amazing painting of you, one of my favorites of hers, by the way. And so I invite you to everything, my friend, as just continued love for all you do for us and the time that you make for us. Please continue to make time, and we'll talk offline about when you guys can. But you are welcome in all places for all things. And it would be wonderful.
We adore you and John.
Love you very much.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Have a great rest of your day. I'm Rachel Ray, and this is I'll Sleep When I'm Dead. Keep up to date with this podcast across all social media platforms at Rachel Ray and at rachelray.com. I'll Sleep When I'm Dead is produced by Joanna Jojo Paredes, Tommy T.C. Crudup, Andrew Cappy Kaplan, me, Rach, and special shout out to my husband, John, the Kuzumano, who provides not only the music for our show, but he's been my wingman pretty much every episode of this podcast, and I'm using his studio for it. Thank you, honey. Also, we have editing help from Joel Yetten. Subscribe to this podcast on your listening site of choice, and thank you for listening to I'll Sleep When I'm Dead.